This is all about Abraham being willing to offer Isaac, his son. This is some tough reading stuff. This is amazing. And here we see that God tests the faith of Abraham. It says in verse 1 and 2, "Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. Then he said, Take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I will show you." This sounds pretty hard stuff, doesn't it? God tested Abraham. This was not a test so much to produce faith as it was a test to reveal faith. God built Abraham slowly, piece by piece, year by year, into a man of great faith. This test would reveal some of the faith God had built into Abraham. Notice what Abraham says, and it's a very quick reaction in the passage. Here I am. That's his call. And it's a wonderful example of how the man and woman of faith should respond to God. When Abraham said, Here I am, it meant that he was ready to be taught, ready to obey, ready to surrender, and he was ready to be examined by God. Do we get into that mode? Is that where we're at? He says, Take your son, your only son, Isaac. And significantly, God called Isaac your only son, when in fact Abraham had the other son, Ishmael. Ishmael had since been put away from Abraham's family. We found that in Genesis 21. As far as God's covenant was concerned, Abraham only had one boy. Your only son, Isaac, whom you love. See how God has extended this a little bit in the story. This is the first mention of love in the Bible, of this type anyway. The first mention comes in context of the love between a father and a son, connected with the idea of the sacrificial offering of his son. Wow, have you heard that story before? But we'll come back to that. Every phrase of God's command to Abram was like a knife to him. It says, Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, offer him there as a burnt offering. That must have been really hard to hear. It says, offer him there as a burnt offering. God told Abraham to offer him as a burnt offering. This was not an offering that was being burnt alive, but one with the life first taken by sacrifice and then the body completely burnt before the Lord as the offering. Abraham, remember, lived as a sojourner and a pilgrim in the land of Canaan. The priests of many of the Canaanite religions and for the Canaanite gods said that their gods demanded human sacrifice. So it's not a foreign idea to Abraham. The people of Canaan found nothing especially strange about human sacrifice. And Abraham had thought that his God was different. Wow. Must have been of a shock to him to hear this. With this command, Abraham might have wondered if God, the God of the covenant and the God of who's the creator of heaven and earth, was just like all of the other gods. Yeah. But the end of the story, Abraham knew that God was not like any other God. He knew that he didn't demand the human sacrifice in that format. In truth, Abraham's God is totally different. How would we react if God told us to do such a thing? Well, many years ago, a columnist for the LA Times wrote about this incident, and he said he would have told God to mind his own business if he had been asked that. And I think that's what we would say too, isn't it? We would say, this can't be right. This is not the God that I worship. Sometimes things that are asked of us are a little bit different from what we expect. It says, offer him there as a burnt offering. This test was difficult in yet another aspect, because it seemed to contradict the previous promise of God. God had promised that Isaac would be the one who carries on the family line. And it seems strange and contradictory to kill the son who was promised to carry on the covenant when it had not yet been fulfilled in him. It seemed as if God commanded Abraham to kill the very promise that he made to himself. Very strange. Abraham had to learn the difference between trusting the promise and trusting the promiser. We can put God's promise before God himself and feel it is our responsibility to bring the promise to pass, even if we have to disobey God to do it. But trusting the promiser no matter what, then the promise will be taken care of by the promiser. That's a bit of a tongue twister. Yeah. So many people have made comments about this different stuff. Listen to this one. Brethren, there are times with us when we are called to a course of action which looks as though it would jeopardize our highest hopes. It is neither your business nor your mine to fulfill God's promise, nor to do the least wrong to produce the greatest good. To do evil that good may come is a false morality and a wicked policy. For us is the duty, for God is the fulfillment of his own promise and the preservation of our usefulness. That was said years and years ago by Spurgeon. Notice too where Abraham was told to go. He says, to the land of Moriah, on one of the mountains which I will tell you. This specific place God commanded Abraham to go to, well, it is a very specific place. God carefully directed each detail of this drama, if you want to put it that way. Yeah. Abraham's immediate response of faith, so that Abraham, you notice what he does here in the next part of the passage. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey, and he took two of his young men with him and Isaac his son, and he split the wood and burnt for the burnt offering, and he rose and he went to the place which God had told him. He did it all himself. Abraham rose early. There's no sign of hesitation. Abraham rose early in the morning to do the things he had to get ready. And I dare say it was a pretty restless sleep that Abraham had that night. But his obedience showed that he trusted God, even when he did not understand what was going down. Sometimes we say, I'm not going to obey or believe until I understand it all. Abraham didn't do that. That is to put yourself on equal standing with God. That's a bit crazy. Abraham's obedience showed us that he didn't debate or seek counsel from others. He knew what he had to do and refused to use stalling tactics. Abraham's obedience showed that he trusted God even when he didn't feel like it. There's not a line in this text any about how Abraham felt about it. Not because he didn't feel, but because he was in a state of walking by faith, not by feelings. There's not a word of argument, not one single solitary question that even looks like hesitation. It appears from our reading of the text that God is God, and Abraham goes, yep, okay, I'm off. He said, I will do it. That's incredible. God had trained Abraham over the decades, bringing him to this place of great trust. In just the last chapter, God asked Abraham to give up Ishmael in a less severe way. Abraham did that. God used that and everything else in Abraham's training to build him to great faith. We're going to leave that there today and come back to it next week.